Sunday school class where we're in the book of Leviticus. We've gone through Genesis, Exodus, Leviticus. These five books were written around the same time: Genesis, Exodus, Leviticus, Numbers, Deuteronomy. They're called the five books of the Torah. And they were written actually around the same time while the Jews were wandering the wilderness. Uh, Moses had been collecting data while he was in Egypt. The first 40 years of his life, he was at the library in Alexandria gathering all this information about all the different nations and the generations. And so, using that as his background, God gave him the book of Genesis. Uh, Adam begat Seth, who begat Enoch, who begat Noah, all the way down. He had 40 years wandering the wilderness to write all this down. So he writes it down for the children of Israel to explain how they got to Egypt. And then the book of Exodus is how they left Egypt. And he's talking to those people that he has in his congregation of millions in the wilderness. They are in the Saudi Arabia area, about to cross the Jordan to go into what is now Israel. But it's 40 years before that happened, once they were freed from Egypt. And so God is trying to retrain them, retrain their thinking, and re examine their relationship with Him so that they know how to relate to God, who He is, because they've just learned 200 years of Egyptian gods. Now, I keep saying 200 instead of 400. I know that bothers people, but it was 400 years from the time that that God told Abraham uh, uh, what was going to happen. It was it took 200 years from the day he said that until they were in Egypt, and then 200 years until they left Egypt. So it was 400 years. It was actually 200 years in Egypt. Um, but they've had nothing but training on Egyptian gods. None of the children of Israel, the children of Abraham, Isaac, Jacob, who Jacob's name was changed to Israel, none of his children, excuse me, really had their own personal relationship with God. They grew up in Egypt watching how Egyptians worshiped. They're there 4 generations, 200 years, and God has to retrain them now. He also had to get them ready to leave Egypt because they loved Egypt. They chose to stay in Egypt. God sent them to Egypt so they could be fed during a time of famine. They were supposed to be there for 5 years and then leave. They got there in year two of a 7 year famine, but their brother was in charge, and so they wanted to stay. So they stayed. Then, when Joseph passed and a new Pharaoh came who did not know Joseph's family, they were enslaved, and that's their fault because God had told them that they had land in Israel. They should have left and gone back to their land, but they had it too nice in Egypt, so they stayed. Meanwhile, they're learning Egyptian customs. So God is retraining their thinking. And in the book of Leviticus, He is teaching them, hi, Marilyn, He is teaching them how to uh, deal with the sin problem. And so we've read in the first 10 chapters um, that explain different types of offerings that they are to bring to Him that cover different areas. I won't review that right now, but now He's about to go into a new area in chapter 11, and that's where we are. We're in Leviticus chapter 11. Let me click on this, where He's going to be dealing with the ordinary, everyday life of the people. So He's for 10 chapters, here's how when you've sinned, you come to the temple, and this is how sin is dealt with. But now, let's just talk about your eating habits. Because God is giving the law to preserve them alive. He's got to keep these people alive. He's giving them the law to teach them how to relate to Him, but also how to protect them so that they don't perish, because through them is going to come the Messiah who's going to change the world. He'll be given at the exact time when what happens in Jerusalem affects the entire world. So God knows when to send the Messiah so that the news of what he is done will spread out. Um, so he's got to keep them alive until that time. So that's the purpose of these laws, to keep them, well, first, just to keep God from destroying them because their sin is so grave. Secondly, from keep them from destroying one another. So don't steal from your neighbor, don't commit adultery, don't kill your neighbor. These are things that will make your neighbor mad. You just killed me, I'm really mad. Third, how to protect themselves from sabotaging themselves. How do you keep yourself alive? And so these first laws he's giving about is about eating, just every day, what you should and should not eat. Leviticus chapter 11, verse 1 says, Now the Lord spoke to Moses and Aaron, saying to them, Speak to the children of Israel, saying, These are the animals which you may eat among all the animals that are on the earth. Now he's about to divide them into clean and unclean. He had spoken about this in two different verses earlier in Noah's time, but had never been real specific on what was clean and what was unclean. So now he's going to be very specific because he's got to keep a large number of people alive. Keeping one person alive, keeping Noah alive and his family, those 5 people, they had an understanding of what was clean and unclean. But now he's got to make this general announcement because one person getting some disease that you can wipe out the whole tribe. So everybody's got to understand this. Let me be real specific, God is saying. Yeah, because in Genesis chapter 7, verse 2, during Noah's time, God told Noah, You shall take with you 7 each of every clean animal, a male and a female, into the ark, and 2 each of animals that are unclean, a male and a female. So I still need the unclean animals. They have a purpose. I just don't need as many of them as I need the clean animals, because with the clean animals, I am feeding and doing all this other stuff with the clean animals. With the unclean animals, they're actually scavengers, predators. They have a function also, but I only need 2 each. And then when the flood was over, but he doesn't tell them who are the clean and who are the unclean. He just mentions take the clean, take the unclean. Somehow no one knew. In chapter 8 of Genesis, after the flood, it says, Then Noah built an altar to the Lord and took every clean animal and of every clean bird and offered burnt offerings on the altar. And that's the only time that it's mentioned about this clean or unclean thing. So now he's going to be very specific. Scholars, of which I'm not one, think that there are 3 reasons that God's giving this law at this time. First, he's just teaching them obedience. He's just teaching them obedience because what you eat and don't eat was the original problem. If you remember in Genesis chapter 2, when God's dealing with Adam and Eve, verse 16 and 17, he says, And the Lord commanded the man, saying, Of every tree of the garden you may eat freely. Every tree. There's 1,000 trees. All 999 out of 1,000 trees you can eat freely, no problem. But of the tree of the knowledge of good and evil you shall not eat, for in the day you eat of it, you shall surely die. So I have to give you one thing that you can't do, because I must give you a choice. You must have a choice. I wish I could talk to my people. God invented choice, but he says, don't do it. Don't do it. But he's always said, I set before you life and death, blessing and cursing. Choose life. Choose the blessing. He always gives us a choice. God doesn't remove all choices from us so that we're just robots. I'm inventing choice. Do not eat it. For the day you eat of it, he says, you shall surely die. So what more warning? It's like, don't put your finger in the fire. It will burn you. Okay. So what you eat and don't eat was the original sin. So now some people think he's choosing this in this way because he wants to redo the original, choice and teach them this time to be obedient. A second reason he's doing it, some scholars say, is because he's trying to teach. And the reason I'm saying this because we're not under the law today. So why did God give this law at that time, which we don't necessarily have to abide by today? Okay, so one is that he was trying to restrict their fellowship with pagan nation and pagan worship, because the when they go into what was then called Canaan, today we call it's Israel. There's all these tribes, these other people who do crazy things, and you're going to want to eat with them, and so I'm trying to restrict your fellowship with them. If they're eating crazy stuff, then you won't eat it. If they're eating stuff I've told you not to eat, hopefully you won't eat it. So let me tell you, because he's trying to, what can I do to get you from not hanging out with these crazy people who are going to teach you terrible things that are going to get you killed? In Deuteronomy chapter 12. Deuteronomy chapter 12, when he's kind of summing up everything. Verse 29, it says, when the Lord your God cuts off from before you the nations which you go to dispossess. He's going to cut them off, and you displace them and dwell in their land because of all the horrible things they're doing. That's why they get to be displaced. They're doing horrible, ungodly things that are leading to their death. You're going to be following me, but they're doing things that are slowly eating them up. I don't want you to do those things. So they'll eventually be destroyed, and you'll be replacing them. When that happens and you dwell in their land, verse 30 of Deuteronomy 12 says, take heed to yourself that you are not ensnared to follow them after they are destroyed from before you, that you go, no, he says, and that you do not inquire after their gods, saying, how did these nations serve their gods? I also will do likewise. Whatever they did, we went, look, they built these mighty nations. Now they're all dead, but let's go back and examine this person from the past who did a horrible thing, and let's do the same thing. There are people sometimes tempted today to study horrible things that people did and say, let's do that same thing, we'll just do it better. Instead of, that thing got that person destroyed, maybe we shouldn't do that thing. So I don't want you hanging out with them. I don't want you fellowshipping them. So that's another reason to put up these restrictions. Now, those restrictions continued in after Jesus was dead. So if we look at Paul writing to the Corinthians, he says, now concerning things offered to idols, because that's what God through Moses is trying to prevent them from doing, right? Do not eat things offered to those idols, don't worship with them. So Paul says, now this is 1 Corinthians chapter 8, verse 1. Now concerning things offered to idols, we know that we have knowledge, but knowledge puffs up. And I say, we know better. We know that there really aren't idols, that they're worshiping gods that don't exist. So if somebody made a delicious lobster dinner to an idol gleba, the idol gleba, you know there is no idol in gleba, and that food's just going to sit there and go to waste, and he's like, I'm going to eat that because I know that the idol doesn't exist. He says, yeah, we all have knowledge, but knowledge puffs up. Love edifies. So here's the difference. I can do what I want, but love is concerned about how you look to others and how what you do may influence other people. And if anyone thinks that he knows anything, he knows nothing yet as he ought to know. Now, he's writing to the Corinthians because the Corinthians have written to him first, and he's answering their questions. Like, we can eat anything we want. He says, yes, you can eat anything you want, but think about this. Verse 3 says, but if anyone loves God, this one is known by him. God knows you. God knows your heart. Therefore, concerning the eating of things offered to idols, because you brought it up, we know that an idol is nothing in this world, and that there is no other God but one. We know that. For even if there are so-called gods, whether in heaven or on earth, as there are many gods and many lords that people have invented, he's saying, yet for us, there's one God, one Father, of whom all are all things, and we are for him, and one Lord Jesus Christ, through whom are all things, through whom we live. So he says there's God, and Jesus is the vehicle through which God communicated himself to us. But there's no difference between God and Jesus. He's just simply the form that God took in order to communicate. So when they say through him, the message came through him. through whom are all things and through whom we live. However, there is not in everyone that knowledge. Everyone doesn't know that there are no gods. For some, with consciousness of the idol, until now they eat it as a thing offered to an idol. So for some people, they think there really is an idol. There really is it exists. And now when they've been eating it as a thing offered to an idol. They think that God really exists. Uh, and their conscience, being weak, is defiled because they think they're doing this sinful thing. There really isn't a night, but they think there is. And so if you think it's sin, right? I shouldn't do this. Then don't do it. Because the point is the obedience or the disobedience to your conscience. It's not the act itself. It's God told you you shouldn't do it. So it doesn't matter if somebody else does it. You think you should not do it. So now you're breaking your own conscience. You're going against yourself. So the people who think there's really in God, and you're eating the food or you're doing the thing. So you're defiling yourself, whether there's a God or not. I mean, whether there's some, God of whatever. So he says, verse 8, food does not commend us to God, for neither if we eat are we the better, nor if we do not eat are we the worse. So I didn't eat food to idol, so now I'm a better Christian than you. Well, no, food does not. You're not going to hell because you ate. You're not, but you're making yourself a mess if you think you shouldn't do it, and yet you do it anyway. But beware, verse 9, lest somehow this liberty of yours becomes a stumbling block to those who are weak. So if you're doing something that you know is fine for you, but it's your brother making your brother crazy, maybe don't do it in front of your brother. You can still do it personally because I can do this. God's cool with it, if he actually is cool with it. But if my brother sees me doing it, my brother thinks it's a sin, that might influence my brother to do it. And now my brother's sinning in his head or her head because of something they saw me do. For if anyone sees you, verse 10, who have knowledge, eating in an idol's temple, will not the conscience of him who is weak be emboldened to eat those things offered to idols? Oh, so and so did it. I can do it too. But you think it's a sin. So don't you do it because you think it's wrong, so you should not do it. Verse 11, and because of your knowledge shall the weak brother perish for whom Christ died? But when you thus sin against the brethren and wound their weak conscience, you sin against Christ. You're messing up the relationship with Christ. So don't do that to them. Don't lead somebody into do something that they think is wrong. Therefore, if food makes my brother stumble, I will never again eat meat, lest I make my brother stumble. He means in front of them. In front of them. Stuff that you know is okay, you're free to do, as long as you know it's okay. Not something you're making up. God says it's okay that I stab people. No, there's laws saying don't do that. We know that's not right, just because you think it's right. Now, he addresses in 1 Corinthians verse 10, because these laws, for some reason, no longer apply. These laws about eating meat or whether you can eat this or eat that no longer apply. And Paul's trying to explain why and what to do during this transition time when some people think they still apply and some people think they don't apply. He's writing to a Gentile church. Paul went out and saved the Gentiles. And so they're trying to put on them a lot of Jewish laws that were just meant for the Jews. That's another thing about these laws that people say, well, the Bible says we should still be under this law and that. No, it doesn't. First of all, it was just meant for them to keep them alive. These laws weren't meant for the Gentiles. God had to keep them alive for 1,200 years until they got to the point where people were cooking their food better and it was safe for them to now eat it. So again, one reason is I just want you to be obedient. When I say don't eat of the fruit, I would teach you not to eat of the fruit. Another reason is there are a lot of pagan people who are doing things, and I don't want you involved with their idol worship. So Paul's addressing, okay, you're gonna run into people with that transition people where people used to eat food to idols. Do we still eat food that's offered to idols, or do we don't, or can we do it now? And he's talking to Gentiles. You guys used to eat food to idols, and now you don't, and now you're confused. In 1 Corinthians chapter 10, verse 25, he says, eat whatever is sold in the meat market, asking no questions for conscience sake. because you know it's all good. So if it's sold there, you can eat it. He says, verse 26, for the earth is the Lord's and all its fullness. You know all this stuff belongs to God. You know the real truth. Everything belongs to God. There's not food that some God made and food that God, the God made it all. So he made it all. It's all good. Everything that God made is good. God didn't make stuff that's horrible. He did not. Their, their own particular dietary habits, which I'll get into next, made the food, once it died or once it had certain disease, they didn't know how to determine when something was bad. And so if you ate it, you were going to die. But that's because you couldn't tell when it's good and when it's spoiled. You don't have that knowledge yet. But in 1200 years, you'll have that knowledge, and then I can remove that as a restriction. So they're in that time period where now God is telling them, you can eat everything now because you cook food better. Your laws have changed. You preserve food better, and so it won't kill you. Because I made everything, so there's nothing really that's bad for you. Which people don't understand that either. God made everything. Okay. Anyway, 25. Eat whatever so verse 27. If any of those who do not believes invites you to dinner, and you desire to go, eat whatever set before you, asking no questions for conscience sake. Well, did you offer this? Because you know it's all good. Doesn't matter what that person believes. You're good. However, verse 28, but if anyone says to you, this was offered to an idol, then don't eat it for the sake of the one who told you. Because if they tell you it was offered to an idol, you don't have to be worried. But if they tell you something, then say, oh, I can't eat that then. For the sake of that person, not your, you actually can't eat it, but if it's going to mess that person up, then don't do it. And for their conscience sake, for the earth is the Lord's and all its fullness. Yes, it's true. But conscience, I say, verse 29, and not your own, that person's conscience is going to be messed up. If they see you doing something that they think is a sin, it's going to mess them up. But that of the other. Now, he quotes them. For why is my liberty judged by another man's conscience? Like, I don't care what you do privately to your business, but what you are doing that can mess somebody else up, you have to be careful about it. It says, but if I partake with thanks, why am I evil spoken of for the food over which I give thanks? That's true. In your own house, what you give thanks over, that's good. But what you do in front of somebody else, that can mess them up. Now, Acts chapter 10, um, let me, for a second, plug this in. In Acts chapter 10, um, Peter has a vision of food being brought down, and it happens 3 times that Peter has this vision. It says, the next day, as they went on their journey and drew near the city, Peter went up on the housetop to pray about the 6th hour, and you know that the sheet of food's brought down, and there's all kinds of four-footed animals, wild beasts, creeping things, birds of the air, everything, all the different categories of food, because God's about to get into the different categories. The food that's on the land, food that's in the air, food that's in the ocean. God shows all of it to him because he's trying to say we're transitioning now into a different time period. Those restrictions that I put on you to keep you alive was for just that time period. The voice came to Peter in verse 13 of Acts chapter 10 and said to him, rise, Peter, kill and eat. But Peter said, no, Lord, which is Peter's way to argue. The voice of God, and Peter still says, and I shall never eat anything common or unclean. These were, I know the list. These were on the unclean list. And this was done. And then the voice says, what God has cleansed, you must not any longer call common. I'm telling you that all these things actually are in the clean category. I put some in the unclean category to keep you alive for 1,200 years. But now that you cook better, now that you actually cook your food and you don't just pick up dead things and start eating them, you can now look at everything. I told you to stay away from the Gentiles as long as they were worshiping idols and doing all the crazy stuff they were doing, like putting their children in fire. Uh, as long as they've stopped doing that, you can now talk to Gentiles. Before I had to preserve you because you didn't know the difference between my law and their law. But for 1,200 years, you've been observing my law, so I believe now you know the difference. And when they say, hey, come with us, we're going to kill a bunch of people, you'll say immediately, I'm not going to do that. But 1,200 years ago, you would have said, okay, and gone right with them because you didn't know you didn't know my law well enough. Now you know the difference. Now you can talk to Gentiles. You can eat with Gentiles. You can eat anything. We're good because things have changed. Uh, Now, in verse 28 of Acts chapter 10, when Gentiles actually show up at Peter's door, he says to them, you know how unlawful it is for a Jewish man to keep company with or go to one of another nation, because God kept them apart for a time being, for a time period. But God has shown me that I should not call any man common or unclean. That God made everybody, God loves everybody. Doesn't matter what nationality they are, doesn't matter religion. God loves them all. We're to fellowship with them all. If we can be an influence, wonderful. But we don't look at anybody as unworthy. Now, God's trying to teach that. There are, in our history, we have looked at other nations and other people as we're the godly ones, they're the ungodly ones, so we can do whatever we want to them because they're ungodly, you know. And God's saying, no, treat everybody equally. I love them all equally. You don't get to be the godly one. They're the love them all. And then on that equal footing, you can minister to them. But if you think that they're unclean and they're trash, you'll enslave them, you'll slaughter them, you do horrible things to them. And God's like, no. So he's trying to retrain them. So after Jesus came and said, the law no longer applies, I am the law, and now everything's cool, Peter says in 1 Timothy chapter 4, every creature of God is good. Nothing is to be refused. This is Timothy 4:4. If it is received with thanksgiving, you can eat anything. For it is sanctified by the word of God and prayer. 1 Corinthians chapter 10, verse 23. All things are lawful to me, but not all things are helpful. All things are lawful to me, but not all things are edifying. So he's quoting them. All things are lawful to me, but he's arguing, but not all things are helpful. So, yes, you can do anything you want, but you still have to be mindful. Certain things are going to mess you up. I can drink 15 gallons of vodka in a night. Yes, you can. But that might mess you up. So all things are lawful, but not all things are helpful. All things are lawful, but not all things edify you. So, yeah, God, meaning nothing, no, there's not a thing that you can do that's going to send you to hell. The only thing you're going to do sending us to hell is not believing that Jesus died for our sins. But there are certain things you're going to do that can mess you up. So, yes, we can do whatever we want, but we still have to have a relationship with God and say, should I do this? Should I keep doing this? Is this too much? Is this going to mess me up? Okay. Um, so there was health reasons, right? Health reasons, obedience reasons, idol reasons, as far as fraternizing with pagan nations, and then just health reasons. That at the time, literally, they would run across dead food. They could have been there for 2 or 3 days. They didn't think, I wonder what disease killed that thing, and I wonder if that disease is still there. They would just eat it and then die later and not realize it was that food you ate 3 days ago. We used to do that today. What am I doing that's messing me up? And we're very conscious of all that stuff, but we have to do deep research today to figure out what's triggering this particular condition. They really had no clue. It was that thing you ate. So he has to just tell them, don't eat. So he's about to give the rule. Let me just zip through the rules. So Leviticus chapter 7, verse 3. among animals. So he's going to start things on the land, then things in the sea, then things in the air. Among animals to keep you alive for the next 1,200 years until Jesus' day, when you do finally going to be doing better. Whatever divides the hoof has a cloven hoof, as opposed to a paw, and chews the cud. So if it has a cloven hoof and it chews the cud, that you can eat. Nevertheless, these you shall not eat among these that chew the cud or those that have cloven hooves. Okay, so it has to have both. He's telling them they have to have cloven feet and they have to chew the cud. So if they just do one of them, he says, like the camel, it chews the cud but does not have cloven hooves, so it's unclean to you. Don't eat a camel. The hyrax, the hare. He names different things that, yes, they have cloven hooves, but they don't chew the cud. Don't eat them. Leviticus chapter 7, verse 8. And the swine, it divides the hoof, uh, having cloven hooves, yet it doesn't chew the cud. So the other one chewed the cud. The camel chewed the cud. Don't eat it. The swine does chew the cud, but it doesn't have cloven hooves. It has that one. Wait, it divides the hoof. The swine does divide the hooves, having cloven hooves, yet does not chew the cud. So it's unclean to you. Their flesh you should don't even eat it, and the carcass you shall not touch. They are unclean to you. So let me just make a general rule: don't even touch them. That's again at the time because of their dietary laws. Uh, at the time, the swine could have all kind of undercooked pork, could have all kinds of worms in it, had all kind of stuff in it, and they didn't necessarily cook it that long. So don't eat it because you don't know what's in it. Leviticus chapter 11, verse 9 says, now these you may eat of all that are in the water. So first he did the land. Now he's doing things in the water. Whatever in the water that has fins and scales, it has to have fins and scales. Again, this is because of their dietary laws 1,200 years before Christ. This changed when Christ came because they were now better at cooking their food. The world was better at cooking its food in general. So things in the water, it's got to have fins and a scale. Whether in the sea or in the rivers, you can eat it. But all that in the seas and the rivers that do not have fins and scales got to have both. All that move in the water, any living thing which is in the water, they're an abomination. You don't touch them right now. They're if they don't have fins and scales, they are scavenger. They're probably going to be eating the trash along the bottom, and you don't know how to cook it well enough to deal with that. So don't eat it because you whatever dead thing that they're eating will just go right into you, and whatever killed it will go right into you because you don't cook it. You just take it right out and start eating right out of the. Ooh, I caught that. You don't even walk back to your house. You eat the raw fish. And so don't do that because you don't know how to tell, but you'll be better at cooking. Everybody's going to have a fire in their house by Jesus' time. You'll be better at it. Okay. So these scavengers, they roam the bottom of the sea and had a lot of different parasites. Don't touch them. Leviticus chapter 11, verse 13. And these you should regard as an abomination among birds. So he doesn't give a rule. For the fish, he gave a rule. They've got to have fins and scales. For the on the land, he gave they have to have cloven hooves, not a paw like your dog, but cloven hooves. They got to have cloven hooves and chew the cud. But for the birds, he just gave a list. Don't eat these particular birds. They should not be there. The eagle, the vulture, the buzzard, falcons, raven, the owl, the seagull, the hawk. Don't eat those types of birds. Okay, so they believe it's because they preyed on other animals and they possibly might drink the blood of these other animals, these birds. So vultures see them some dead carcasses lying and they don't think, I wonder what killed that deer. Could it have been some disease? No, I don't care. I'm going to eat it. and I'm going to drink its blood, and that's how it's going to be transmitted into me, whatever it had. And then you think you're going to eat that vulture, and you'll die of whatever that vulture ate. And so don't eat it until later when you're able to detect the difference. Flying insects that creep on all fours. Now, it really just means insects that creep on all fours, like ants or grubs, don't eat them. But you may eat flying insects that creep on all fours that have joined legs above their feet, which to leap on the earth, like locusts, crickets, grasshoppers. You can eat those. That's why John the Baptist ate wild honey, I mean locusts and wild honey, because you can eat those if they can jump. They're, then you can eat those. But just regular ones, don't eat them. Leviticus chapter 11, verse 24. These shall become unclean. Whoever touches the carcass of any of them shall be unclean until evening. So if you touch the carcass of something that was dead, since you don't know how to tell what it died of, you've got to come back. You've got to wash. And God has to write this down. Well, did we not have to do that for ourselves? Wash your hands when you wash your hands more often. You had to put up because people just don't wash their hands, and so you have to train people. They certainly weren't washing their what? They didn't have a dispenser. They carried the dead thing back. It's like no, you're unclean. So stay away from people. Wash, sterilize. He's got to explain this to them because they don't understand that concept. We didn't either apparently. Leviticus chapter 11, verse 27. Whatever goes on its paws among all kinds of animals that go on all fours, they're unclean to you. And whoever touches the carcass shall be unclean until evening. So, if you find a dead rat, don't eat it. So this is good because if a dead rat was found in an Israeli village, they would carefully dispose of it, take it outside the village. And then you would have to wash afterwards. And this actually kept the Jewish people alive. This practice, just in the general community of not dealing with dead rats, for example, helped the Jews while they were in Europe. When the bubonic plague came, the Black Death came, and it killed 1/4 of Europe's population in the 1300s. 1 out of every 4 people in Europe was killed during the 1300s. Many Jewish communities were spared because they were following hygienic regulations. They weren't touching dead things, which people didn't know not to do that. They would find dead rodents and not touch them and get rid of them. Other people would find dead rodents and just sweep them aside and not realize you got to clean out the whole house, you got to do all this stuff. So the Jews were already doing that. The bubonic plague wiped out 1/4 of the people in Europe, but very few Jews died. So sadly, they were then accused of spreading diseases and punished. And you must have caused it because you didn't die. Why didn't you die? Because we followed what the Bible says. Instead of saying, we want to do what you did, they attacked the Jews because God kept them alive. Okay, Leviticus chapter 11, verse 29. There also be unclean to you among the creeping things that keep on the earth, like the mole, a mouse, lizard. Don't eat them. Just to teach them obedience, teach them not to do what other nations are doing, and to keep them alive for health reasons. If any dead thing falls, this is Leviticus chapter 11, verse 32. It's just common sense to us today. If a dead thing falls on anything when they are dead, that thing is now unclean and you have to wash it. God has to put this in the Bible. Whether there's any item of wood or clothing or skin or sack, whatever item it is, which any work is done, like a vessel, something that you eat in, it must be put in water. He has to say you've got to wash it. They don't know that. They don't know that. No one's doing that. And again, people are dying, but they have no idea what the connection is. A dead thing falls in, they just take the dead thing out. No consciousness of germs and virus and all that stuff. at this time in any nation on earth. But God says, just do what I'm saying. Someday scientists will come along and explain all this stuff to you, but for now, just do it. If a dead thing falls on your clothes, falls in your containers, and really, verse 32, 31, 33 says, any earthen vessel in which any of them falls, you shall break, and whatever then it's unclean. In such a vessel, any edible food upon which water falls becomes unclean. If something dead fell in the water and then you washed with that same water, don't, because a dead thing fell in the water and then you use that same water to wash the thing. The water's unclean, it's unclean. If it fell in it, if it fell in the water, it's all unclean. Any drink that may be drunk from it is unclean. Dead thing fell in there. Don't fill it up and then drink from it. It's unclean. It's got to go through the whole ceremony of washing. You got to do all these things, and God's having to explain this to them. And everything on which any part of any such carcass falls shall be unclean. That's verse 35. Whether it is an oven, even your stove, something dead fell onto your stove, you got to clean the stove. What? Yes. Leviticus 11, chapter 42. Leviticus chapter 11, verse 42. Whatever crawls on its belly, whatever goes on all fours, whatever has many feet among all creeping things. So it's got a bunch of centipede, it's got a bunch, it's a spider, has a bunch of feet, crawls on its belly. Let me just spell it all out, because if I don't spell it all out, you think, oh, you never said that, and you're going to eat it. All creeping things that creep on the earth, these you shall not eat, for they're an abomination. He's got to make it an abomination. It's an abomination. He's got to make it, don't do that. Because some things you have to make really scary for somebody for it to stay in their brain. It's an abomination. Again, 1,200 years later, okay, we're good. If I made it, it's clean. But when it becomes unclean because of something happening on the earth, and this is like when they're talking about flying things, like bats. Don't eat a bat. Don't eat a dead bat. Don't do that. Oh, had we learned those things and are still following, and there's some countries who need to read the Bible that will help keep them alive and not spread diseases. Verse 44 of Leviticus 11, for I'm the Lord your God, you shall therefore consecrate yourselves, and you shall be holy, for I'm holy, and neither shall you defile yourselves with any creeping thing that creeps on the earth, for I am the Lord who brings you up out of the land of Egypt to be your God. You shall therefore be holy, for I am holy. So I'm trying to keep you separate from the practices of those other nations that are slowly dying and they don't know why they died. I'm trying to just teach you obedience. When I say don't do something, I'm just teaching you not to do it. Parents do this for kids. Just do it because I said so. I don't have to explain 5,000 things to you. You have to be used to saying, if I go, no, that you just stop immediately. You may not see the car coming. You may not see that electric plug. You may not see the glass. If I say no, I'm just teaching you to respond to my no. Later, I can explain, but you don't need the explanation first. Well, I'm going to keep doing it until you explain no, take your hand out the fire. So God's just explaining these things. In years to come, you will discover the reasons why, but I'm trying to keep you separate from those other nations. They're dying off, and you're going to be a people that stays around, and people will have to look at you eventually. Their choice is to either look at you and go, we hate you because you stay around, or look at you and say, what are you guys doing? And then you're going to hold up the book. Say, we're people of the book. That's why we're still here. And then the intelligent people will, well, I want to read your book. Other people will say, let's burn your book. Okay, fine. But that will be on them. So now in Daniel chapter 1, verse 8, when the people, the children of Israel had sinned and been carried off to Babylon, Daniel gets there. You remember it says, verse 8 says, but that Daniel purposed in his heart that he would not defile himself with the portion of the king's delicacies. Because he knew what he could eat and not eat, and he's looking at stuff that they're eating, thinking, ooh, I'm not going to eat that. Nor with the wine which he drank, because you don't clean out your vessels. Dead stuff could have fallen in there. I don't trust you. You're not kosher. So I'm not going to eat or drink anything that you got. Therefore, he requested of the chief of the eunuchs that he might not defile himself. Okay, we're going to get back to these eunuchs in a few weeks when we get to certain laws, but these eunuchs and who they were. Verse 12, he says, please test your servants for 10 days. This is what Daniel's saying to them. Because they got, no, you're going to eat this food. Okay, test us for 10 days. And let them give us vegetables to eat and water. This vegetable, this, but how you make your wine, how you make your other delicacies, we can't do it. So just test and see what happens. Verse 15 says, at the end of 10 days, their features appeared better and fatter in flesh than all the young men who ate the portion of the king's delicacies. Yes, we look all healthy, and you've seen those healthy looking people. You've seen them. What are you doing? You must be exercising. Well, yes, I don't eat this, and I exercise every day. You can tell when someone just looks healthy. So that Daniel and his people were looking really healthy, and the other people were looking kind of sickly, but they didn't know it was because of the food they were eating. So they've been continuing this idea of, I'm going to eat just what God tells me to eat and be different from other nations. In Leviticus chapter 11, verse 46, this is the law of the animals and the birds and every living creature that moves in the waters. 3 categories, right? And of every creature that creeps on the earth, to distinguish between the unclean and the clean, and between the animal that may be eaten and an animal that may not be eaten. So I'm telling you this, how to live on your daily lives so that you will stay alive. Here you are in 1400, 1200 BC. Acts chapter 15, these are his last verses, confirming, though, that it has changed for us today. Because God's doing this because of their dietary habits, etc. And because there was no distinction at time between, their nation didn't have a set of traditions that they can contrast with other nations. So they were going to be easily susceptible to following the practices of other nations because the Jews at that time didn't have any traditions. God's defining their traditions now. Now we have a body of work, and we know for ourselves, oh, I shouldn't eat that. Oh, this is my 12th donut. I need to stop. We understand that now. They did not understand that then. Acts chapter 15, verse 10 says, now therefore, why do you test God by putting a yoke on the neck of the disciples? This is Gentile disciples, which neither our fathers nor we were able to bear. So at the council in Jerusalem, after Jesus had come, they're deciding, do we make the Gentiles follow the Jewish law? And Paul says, why are you test God by putting a yoke on the neck of the disciples, these new disciples that we're bringing in, which neither our fathers nor we were able to bear. We weren't able to follow it that well, and now you're going to try to make them go back under the law. We don't have to do that anymore. The laws changed for us because there was a reason for the ceremonial law and the dietary laws, and those reasons are gone. So scriptures we find that are ceremonial, that the priests were supposed to do, we no longer have to do them because Jesus is the high priest. They were simply a shadow of what Jesus was going to do. So as far as not wearing linen and knit things, we don't have to worry about that anymore because that priestly duties are dissolved. Jesus did them all. And we have a new set of priestly duties, which is just to love one another, not worry about if we're wearing knit and linen. So ceremonial laws have been done away with, and dietary laws have changed because of the habits of the world are different now. For it seemed good, verse 28 of Acts chapter 15, to the Holy Spirit and to us to lay upon you no greater burden than these necessary things. So they decided at that council, here's the things we are going to make you do, but the rest you don't have to be under the law any longer. That you abstain from things offered to idols, and Paul goes into the whole big thing, because of how it makes other people look at you. From blood, try not to drink blood, and from things strangled, and from sexual immorality. So don't sleep with your auntie, don't sleep with your stepmothers, don't sleep with, these things that are in the law, we want to keep those. But we understand that other stuff has been done away with. If you keep yourselves from these, you will do well. And all the law is now summed up in love God and love your neighbor. If you're doing those things, you won't kill your neighbor, you won't steal from your neighbor, you won't commit adultery with your neighbor if you love them. So we don't have to follow the law exactly like they did where God had to spell it out for them, because now he's written the law in our hearts. And if you have God in your heart, the Holy Spirit will speak to you and say, for you should stop at that one glass of wine. You can drink 4 glasses because you have a different, but God will speak to each person individually and tell them what they should and should not do. Colossians chapter 2, verse 16. So let no one judge you in food or in drink or regarding a festival or a new moon or Sabbath. Don't let you have your own personal relationship. which are a shadow of things to come, but the substance is Christ. Those feasts, those new moons, those others, they were just a shadow of things to come. That's why they were created. So whether you're doing these festivals or not doing it, you can keep Passover or not keep Passover. Passover was teaching us about Jesus. And now that Jesus has come, he's now the substance. He's now the real thing. So if you don't think you should keep Passover longer, okay. If you think you should keep it, okay. That's on you. And Romans 14:14, I know and am convinced by the Lord Jesus that there is nothing unclean of itself. So I understand now, technically, God made everything unclean. There are just certain animals that have a job that God created them to do. God created them to eat those parasites. God created them to eat those things. Those animals can have disease in them, but you can't eat those animals because you don't have the same immune system that that animal has. And so if you eat that that thing that ate the dead thing, you'll get sick. Okay? But the animal in of itself is not unclean. And as dietary laws have changed, then we cook things better, and so we realize, oh, so there's nothing really actually that's technically unclean. Paul says this. I know and I'm convinced by the Lord Jesus, there is nothing unclean of itself. There was just at a time period you couldn't do it, but God technically, He's made all things good. Every creature is good. And if you're doing the right thing with it, it's all open and available to, unless God speaks to your heart and says, you should not eat that. That'll be bad for you. If you get to drink number 3, that'll be bad for you. You shouldn't drink at all. God will speak to us all individually now. But to him considers anything to be unclean, to him it's unclean. So if something like I should do that, that's bad, then you should not do it. But don't judge your brother because your brother's doing it, because God may be saying something different to that person. Finally, 1 Corinthians chapter 10, verse 31. Therefore, whether you eat or drink or whatever you do all to the glory of God. I don't drink. That's lovely. Do that to the glory of God. I do have a drink every so often. Lovely too. You have to have your own relationship with God. Make sure you're doing it to glorify God and not to be rebellious. Well, I'm going to drink everything. I'll just show them. Then if you're doing it with that attitude, you're just doing something just to prove to everybody how whatever you are. That's not doing it to the glory of God. So whatever you're doing, have a relationship with God in that thing, whatever that is, and make sure that it's glorifying God in your life. Okay, so we will go to Leviticus chapter 12 next week. Thank you so much for listening in. Oh, thank you. See, I'm wearing my red jacket. I forgot. Merry Christmas. That's tomorrow. That's fantastic. Merry Christmas to everyone out there. And let us not forget the reason for the season, which is more gifts. No, I'm kidding. Which is to glorify the birth of Christ. And we should be demonstrating his love all year round, but especially during this season when people's minds are on it. Let's be Christians and to help demonstrate who Christ is by loving people and not screaming at them. Because Christ loved. We give as a demonstration how God gave because he loved so much. And so that's part of why we give to one another, because we're doing, see how God loved and he gave. That's a nice part of the season. But let's make it about Christ even more so than the gifts. All right, and I'll see the rest of you on Wednesday after the holidays where we're in the book of Luke. All right, thanks so much. All right, bye-bye. End live video. There we go.